Bullies pick on the wrong new black kid, not knowing he has a martial arts prodigy. In a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside of Boulder, Colorado, a new chapter in life is about to begin for one teenage boy, unaware that his arrival will trigger a series of events that no one sees coming. On the surface, this community seems picturesque: clean streets, lined with tall pine trees, modern schools boasting the latest technology, and an air of tranquility that gives families a sense of safety. Yet, hidden behind that placid facade are tensions ready to erupt, alliances waiting to be tested, and secrets begging to be uncovered. When the new kid steps into Roosevelt High School, his very presence challenges the status quo. Several bullies, infamous for pushing others around, think they've found an easy target, but they fail to realize that beneath his calm demeanor lies a hidden talent, a masterful command of martial arts skills. Soon, the entire school will learn what happens when bullies pick on the wrong newcomer. Before we dive in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. Omari Davis was no stranger to change. His family had moved from Detroit to Atlanta to Dallas, and now to Boulder. Each time, he had blended into the background, quietly making sense of his surroundings, until he was forced to reveal what he could really do. Standing in front of Roosevelt High School for the first time, Omari clutched his black Adidas backpack, exhaled, and murmured to himself, another fresh start. His father's job in cybersecurity had uprooted them once more, but Omari never complained. He learned that life rarely gave second chances, so he tried to see each move as a new beginning. Inside the school's bustling hallways, students wore the typical American uniform of Nike sneakers, jeans, and hoodies, emblazoned with famous sports teams, like the Denver Broncos. Flyers for upcoming events, debate club tryouts, a drama production of West Side Story, and sign-ups for the track team littered the walls. The clamor of excited chatter filled Omari's ears, accompanied by the slamming of locker doors and squeaking of rubber soles on the polished floors. During homeroom, the teacher, Miss S. Caldwell, introduced Omari to the class. He noticed the immediate shift in atmosphere as eyes slid to him. Some gazes showed curiosity, a few lit with interest, but there was also the unmistakable sneer in the corner of the room from a group of 3 boys. One of them, a tall and wiry kid with a perpetual smirk on his face, nudged his friend and mouthed something. Omari couldn't hear the remark, but he knew the look. He'd seen it. In every school he'd attended, bullies were sizing him up. During a brief lull in introductions, Miss S. Caldwell's phone buzzed. She excused herself into the hallway. The moment she stepped out, the tall kid from the corner, wearing a Letterman jacket with a faded RHS, swiveled around. "Hey, new kid," he sneered. "You sure you're in the right place? Heard Boulder's real different from whatever streets you came from." Laughter erupted around him, and Omari felt a prickle of unease. But instead of responding, Omari locked eyes with the kid, refusing to break the stare. He'd learned long ago that the first rule when dealing with bullies was not to show fear. It was a lesson he had internalized from years of disciplined martial arts training under his mentor, Grandmaster Lee Wen, in Atlanta. Omari had joined Lee Wen's dojo at the age of 6, initially to build confidence in the face of constant moves. Over the years, he discovered he possessed an uncanny aptitude for mastering complex techniques in Wing Chun, Judo, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Though he avoided showy demonstrations, he was, by every definition, a martial arts prodigy. When Miss S. Caldwell returned, the commotion died down, and the day proceeded with lessons on the Civil War, geometry, and Spanish verbs. Yet Omari could sense tension simmering like an unspoken threat in the air. Even when he stepped out into the hallway at lunchtime, he felt multiple sets of eyes on him. He kept his shoulders relaxed, though inside, his instincts were on alert. Omari's first lunch break at Roosevelt High was uneventful at first glance. A hamburger and fries from the cafeteria, a bottle of Pepsi in hand, and a solitary table near the corner. Though a few friendly students waved in greeting, Omari sensed he still carried the mantle of the new kid. Around him, groups of friends shared inside jokes, couples huddled close, and in the far corner, the tall boy from homeroom, who introduced himself between classes as Nick Henderson, was leaning back in his seat, scanning the lunchroom for potential targets. Two boys flanked Nick, Tyler, and Luke, each with the same smug expression. Omari pretended not to notice them, focusing on enjoying his meal. A soft-spoken voice interrupted his train of thought. "Do you mind if I sit here?" A slender girl with curly hair and a bright smile hovered behind the seat across from him. Her name tag read Tessa, pinned for her part-time volunteering in the library. Omari offered a small grin and gestured for her to sit. "You're new, right?" Tessa asked, unwrapping a homemade sandwich. "Must be tough, starting mid-semester, but Roosevelt isn't all bad. Well, except for certain people." She glanced meaningfully toward Nick and his cronies, who were tossing fries at a smaller boy. Omari tensed slightly. "I've seen bullies before. Thanks for the warning, though." Tessa sighed, tossing a glance around the cafeteria as if expecting trouble at any moment. "Nick basically runs the junior class, especially after he made quarterback last year. He's difficult. That's one word for it," Omari said, taking a sip of Pepsi. He noticed Tyler was laughing obnoxiously as Nick taunted the smaller boy, demanding lunch money. A swirl of anger rose within Omari. He forced himself to remain calm, recalling Grandmaster Li Wen's teachings. Never strike first. Never escalate. The best defense is control of your opponent and yourself. Just as Omari was finishing up, Nick and his two friends sauntered over. They loomed over Omari and Tessa's table, arms crossed in a near-perfect tableau of high school intimidation. "So, new kid, you made a friend," Nick sneered, his gaze flicking to Tessa. "Got time to pay tribute to the welcoming committee?" Omari raised an eyebrow, feigning ignorance. "Tribute? Don't play dumb. We like to make sure new students understand who's boss around here," Nick said, eyes narrowing. Tessa started to speak up, but Tyler nudged her shoulder dismissively. "Relax, Tessa. We're just having some fun." He turned to Omari. "So, you got $5 you can spare for an initiation?" Omari's expression remained impassive, not interested. Nick's lips pressed into a thin line. "I wasn't asking." A hush seemed to drop over the tables nearby. Students recognized the start of one of Nick's usual scenes. Tessa's eyes were wide, silently pleading with Omari not to make a fuss. But Omari's calm was unwavering. Gently, he pushed his chair back and stood up, stepping within arm's length of Nick. Then he locked eyes with the bully, a disconcertingly steady gaze that made Nick hesitate for a half-second. "I don't want trouble," Omari said softly, "but I'm not paying you anything." Nick's smirk faltered. Tyler and Luke exchanged uncertain glances. They were used to swift compliance from their victims. Nick puffed up his chest, glancing around to ensure he still had an audience. "Fine. Let's see how long you last at Roosevelt without contributing." With that, Nick tipped Omari's tray, sending the half-eaten burger and fries tumbling onto the table. A few onlookers gasped, but Omari merely stepped back, refusing to rise to the provocation. The bullies snickered and turned away, leaving the rest of the cafeteria in tense silence. Tessa lowered her gaze and started dabbing at the spilled food with some napkins. Omari whispered, "Thanks, but I can clean up my own mess." He helped gather the debris. Inside, his calm facade was threatened by an undercurrent of indignation. He wanted to fight back, to stand against the bullies. But if there was one thing he'd learned from martial arts, it was discipline. He wouldn't waste his skills on a petty lunchroom confrontation. Across the cafeteria, Nick looked back over his shoulder, and though he tried to sneer, Omari caught a flash of uncertainty in the bully's eyes. Tessa noticed it too, and leaned in. "He's rattled," she murmured. Omari shrugged. "Then maybe that's enough for now." But neither of them realized that this was only the opening volley in a much larger battle for dignity and respect, one that would soon turn Roosevelt High upside down. During the next few days, Omari noticed subtle escalations in Nick's attempts to unnerve him. Vandalized textbooks in his locker, foul rumors whispered behind his back, and so-called accidental shoulder bumps in the hallway. Omari handled each provocation with the same stoic composure, which only seemed to enrage Nick further. The rest of the student body watched with morbid fascination, waiting for someone to finally snap. At night, Omari trained in his makeshift home dojo, a corner of the garage his parents had let him set up after the move. Cardboard boxes and half-unpacked furniture were shoved aside to create space for his Wing Chun wooden dummy, grappling mats, and a battered old punching bag. He practiced the forms and movements taught by Grandmaster Li Wen, going over them again and again until every strike flowed like water. The rhythmic thud, thud, thud of fists and feet, connecting with the wooden dummy, became his lullaby, coaxing him into a state of unwavering focus. The deeper reason Omari refused to fight at school was rooted in his promise to his mother. Back in Dallas, after a brawl with 3 older kids who called him slurs, Omari had left them bruised and humiliated. Though he was defending himself, the sight of those battered teens had haunted him. His mother had pleaded, "Never use your gift to harm unless there's no other option." Omari took that to heart. He sought to channel his martial arts prowess into self-control and quiet strength. One Friday afternoon, as the final bell rang, the hallways buzzed with excitement for the upcoming weekend. Omari was organizing his locker when Tessa approached him, looking apprehensive. "Nick's waiting outside," she whispered. "Says he wants to talk to you. You might want to leave through the back." Omari considered that, but something inside him refused to run. "No," he said. "I'll face him, whatever that means." Tessa hovered anxiously by his side as he swung his bag over his shoulder and headed out the main doors. There, in the school parking lot, Nick and his 2 cronies were leaning against a bright red Ford Mustang, music blaring from the open windows. A small group of curious onlookers formed a semicircle around them. Nick strolled forward, shoulders puffed out, face set in a defiant scowl. "Hey, new kid, you've been ignoring me all week. Not very neighborly of you." Omari set his backpack down calmly. "I'm not ignoring you, I just don't have anything to say." A nearby junior chewed gum noisily, enthralled by the tension. Tyler snickered. Luke crossed his arms. Nick was silent for a moment, as though searching for the best angle of attack. Then he cracked his knuckles. "You know, you're real tough for someone who doesn't fit in here. Bet your fancy moves won't help you out in the real world." Omari felt the tingle of adrenaline, that faint buzzing in his veins, but he forced his stance to remain neutral. Nick stepped closer, feigning a lunge to see if Omari would flinch. Omari didn't move an inch. Embarrassed by the lack of response, Nick shoved Omari's shoulder. Hard. Still, Omari stayed rooted, refusing to be goaded into a fight. "What's the matter?" Nick sneered. "Scared?" The circle of onlookers grew. Some were filming with their smartphones. Whispers circulated like wildfire. A few kids urged Omari to fight back, but the new kid just kept silent. Then, a loud voice cut through the tension. "Nick, get out of here! Miss!" Warren, the assistant principal, strode across the parking lot, her heels clacking on the asphalt. "Haven't you caused enough trouble for one day? Everyone, disperse. Go home." Nick reluctantly backed off, but not before pointing 2 fingers at Omari's chest in a wordless promise. "This isn't over." As the crowd melted away, Omari picked up his backpack, heart pounding with unspent energy. Tessa hurried over, looking both relieved and worried. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Omari inhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from his muscles. "I'm fine. For now." He glanced at Nick climbing into his Mustang. Their eyes met momentarily, and Omari felt a spark of foreboding. There was a storm brewing, one he couldn't ignore forever. That weekend, Omari's father, Anthony Davis, asked his son to accompany him on a small father-son outing. Their destination, the local Boulder Farmers Market downtown, followed by a scenic drive to Clear Creek Canyon. The crisp mountain air smelled of pine and earth, a refreshing contrast to the stuffy tension at school. As they strolled through stalls of organic vegetables and artisanal pastries, Omari felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He loved these moments free from the pressures of teenage drama, free to just be a kid exploring new places with his dad. But Anthony, perceptive as always, noticed the shadow in his son's eyes. "How's school, O?" he asked, using the nickname Omari had carried since childhood. "You making friends?" "Some," Omari replied. He didn't want to lie, but he also didn't want to worry his father. It's different than Dallas or Atlanta, still settling in. Anthony gave a knowing nod. "Kids giving you trouble?" Omari hesitated, then sighed. A few bullies, nothing I can't handle. His father's gaze turned serious. Remember what we talked about, Omari. Use your head, not your fists. You got too much going for you to throw it away on some schoolyard fight. Omari recognized the reflection of his mother's warning. I know, Dad. I promise I'll try not to let it get to that point. They left the farmer's market and drove to Clear Creek Canyon, where they hiked a short trail leading to a rocky overlook. Anthony asked about Omari's martial arts training, and the conversation turned to stories of Omari's earliest tournaments, like the time he won the junior black belt category at a regional competition in Atlanta, leaving the crowd in stunned awe at the precision of his kicks and the speed of his grapples. That memory brought a smile to Omari's face. He missed the thrill of competition, the electric hum of the crowd, and the deep concentration that came with it. Halfway through the hike, they paused at a scenic viewpoint. Below them, the creek sparkled, weaving through the rocky canyon. Omari breathed in the crisp mountain air. He was grateful for this moment of peace, a chance to recharge before returning to the battle lines at Roosevelt. That same night, Omari retreated to the garage to practice. He methodically worked through each kata, each grappling form, each series of punches and elbow strikes. After about an hour, he sat cross-legged on the mat, eyes closed, focusing on his breathing. His father's words and his mother's pleas swirled in his mind. Then he remembered the look on Nick's face in the parking lot. Could he really avoid a fight forever? And if it came down to it, would he show restraint or unleash the full extent of his power? The weekend passed quickly: shopping trips, chores, a movie night with the family. When Monday morning came, Omari felt renewed, ready to tackle a new week with the same quiet resolve. Little did he know that events were conspiring to strip away his choices and force him into a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of Roosevelt High. The second week of classes started innocently enough. Omari's teachers praised his quick grasp of the coursework. He made small talk with classmates, joined a study group for biology, and even considered trying out for the track team. Tessa remained a steady ally, offering tips on navigating the social maze of Roosevelt. But beneath the small victories, tensions with Nick simmered. One afternoon, Omari found himself alone in the locker room after gym class. Everyone else had left for the showers, but Omari lingered, carefully reorganizing his things. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered, and Nick walked in, Tyler and Luke at his side. Their expressions were predatory, cornering Omari near the rows of blue metal lockers. Nick was the first to speak, low and menacing. You've been here 2 weeks now, new kid, and I still don't see you showing any respect. Omari snapped his locker shut, trying to stay calm. Respect is earned, not demanded. Luke stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Yeah, well, maybe we'll teach you that lesson the hard way. Omari's heart pounded, but his face remained composed. Breathe, he thought. Stay in control. You really don't want to do this. Nick let out a hollow laugh. Who's gonna stop us? You? Without warning, Nick lunged. His fist shot toward Omari's jaw with surprising speed, but Omari's reflexes were faster. He sidestepped, deflecting Nick's punch with a fluid redirect of his forearm. The bully stumbled forward, momentarily off balance. Startled, Tyler swung a roundhouse punch. Omari ducked under it, shifting his weight as Grandmaster Lee Wen had taught him. With a single sweep of his leg, he knocked Tyler's feet out from under him. Tyler crashed to the ground, breath whooshing out of his lungs. The impact echoed in the empty locker room. Luke hesitated, uncertain, but Nick regained his footing and charged again. This time, Omari sidestepped once more, hooking Nick's arm and using his momentum to flip him onto a nearby bench. The wood cracked under the force, leaving Nick gasping in pain. Luke glanced back and forth between his sprawled friends and Omari's calm stance. Then he yelled, "You freak!" and ran toward the door, apparently deciding that he wanted no part of this. Panting, Nick groped at the dented bench while Tyler groaned on the floor. Omari stepped back, refusing to press the advantage. "Please," he muttered, voice laced with frustration. "Just leave me alone." But Nick's eyes shone with hatred. "You're dead," Nick spat through gritted teeth. "You think this is over? We'll destroy you." Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Another student poked his head in, eyes wide at the chaos. Omari took a step back as Tyler staggered to his feet. and Nick struggled upright, clutching his side. The bullies glared at Omari, then lurched out of the locker room, cursing under their breath. Omari closed his eyes, tension roaring through him like a hurricane. He'd defended himself, done what was necessary, but this was exactly what he'd hoped to avoid. Word of the locker room fight spread faster than a wildfire, and by the end of the day, the entire school seemed to be buzzing with stories of how the new kid single-handedly took down Nick and Tyler. Eyewitness accounts varied in detail. Some claimed Omari did a flying kick off the lockers. Others swore he performed a judo toss that left Nick practically embedded in the bench. Though the rumor mill exaggerated, the result was clear. Nick's pride was gravely wounded, and the bullies had a new target painted on Omari's back in bold letters. Over the next few days, Omari tried to keep a low profile, but rumors were unstoppable, especially when spurred on by enthralling half-truths. Tessa insisted he file a report with Miss Warren, the assistant principal, but Omari refused, hoping to avoid drawing more attention. Miss Warren did pull him aside to ask questions about the locker room altercation, but Nick and Tyler had conveniently offered a false version of the events. They claimed Omari ambushed them without provocation. Still, no official punishment was handed down since there were no reliable witnesses. For now, the situation was in limbo. On Wednesday, something unexpected happened. Coach Riley, the athletic director for Roosevelt High, approached Omari during lunch. The imposing man, known for his success in guiding the school's football team to the state semifinals, gave Omari a once-over and smiled. "Heard you've got some serious moves," he said, nodding to an empty seat at Omari's table. Omari shrugged, uncomfortable with the sudden spotlight. "Just some martial arts training." Coach Riley tapped a pen against the table. "Ever considered wrestling? We have a strong program. A lot of it crosses over with grappling, which I hear you're pretty good at." Omari hesitated. "I never wrestled competitively, sir. I've mostly focused on Wing Chun, Judo, and BJJ." "That foundation could make you a fierce competitor," Coach Riley insisted. "I'm not saying you gotta join, but think about it, okay? Practice starts in a couple weeks." Omari nodded, promising to consider it. A shift was happening. While some students eyed him with suspicion or resentment, others showed genuine curiosity or even admiration. Tessa teased him, joking that he might become the next big star at Roosevelt, overshadowing Nick in the process. Omari didn't love that idea. Part of him wanted to shine. He had no desire to hide who he was, but the bigger part dreaded more hostility from Nick and his crew. Sure enough, Nick responded to Omari's rising popularity with sly manipulations. In English class, Omari found vile insults scrawled on his desk, referencing his race in ways that cut him deeply. Someone left a crumpled note in his locker reading, "Go back to where you came from." Omari tried to maintain his composure, but the anger grew, a coiled serpent in his chest. One afternoon, Tessa found Omari sitting in the courtyard, the hateful note clutched in his hand. The fury in his eyes startled her. "I wish I could just—" Omari stopped himself, exhaling sharply. "This stuff gets to me." Tessa gently placed a hand on his arm. "They're trying to provoke you. People like Nick thrive on your reaction. Don't let them win." He clenched the note but nodded. "I won't, but if they keep pushing." She squeezed his shoulder in understanding. "They'll push until you push back. That's how bullies are." As the weeks passed, Nick's animosity took a more strategic shape. Rumors circulated that Nick was planning something big, maybe at the upcoming homecoming dance or the pep rally before the Roosevelt versus Jefferson football game. Whispers of a humiliating public stunt, or even an ambush in the parking lot, ran rampant. Omari caught glimpses of Nick making conspiratorial gestures, whispering behind cupped hands with Tyler, Luke, and others. But the bully was careful. He never openly confronted Omari in front of faculty. It was a cat and mouse game, tension building like a drum roll. Outside of school, Omari's training sessions intensified. His father noticed the bruises on his arms, but Omari claimed they came from practicing takedowns incorrectly. In reality, he was pushing his body to the limit, determined that if the confrontation inevitably came, he would be ready. The words of Grandmaster Lai Wen echoed in his mind. Mastery of martial arts is not for the sake of violence, but for the sake of peace within. One evening, Omari was scrolling through Instagram when he stumbled upon Nick's profile. A new post featured Nick and Tyler smirking at the camera, captioned with a cryptic message about teaching a lesson to some undeserving newcomer. The comment section bubbled, with inside jokes and references to an event on Friday night. Omari's gut told him it wouldn't be pretty. He closed the app, steeling himself. Friday arrived in a haze of excitement. The pep rally for the big game was scheduled during the last period. The entire school gathered in the gym. The bleachers rumbled with energetic applause, students decked out in the school colors of navy and gold. The cheer squad executed flips, while the marching band played a rowdy tune. Principal Matthews gave a short speech, prompting roars of school spirit. Omari sat with Tessa and a few other classmates, scanning the crowd. He spotted Nick in the front row, wearing his varsity jacket, flanked by Tyler, Luke, and the rest of the football team. Every now and then, Nick would glance over his shoulder, eyes scanning for Omari. Their gazes locked, and Nick offered a smug, knowing grin that made the hairs on the back of Omari's neck stand on end. Midway through the rally, the lights dimmed, and the MC announced a special performance. A short comedic skit the football team had prepared. Omari's heart sank when he realized Nick, Tyler, and Luke were front and center. Dressed in silly costumes, they performed a caricature of a new student, stumbling over his words, bungling through school, and humiliating himself in front of everyone. The crowd laughed as Nick, wearing baggy clothes and a fake accent, pretended to be clueless. The subtext was obvious. He was mocking Omari. The skit climaxed with Nick proclaiming, "I don't know how to fight, but I sure can run." Then Tyler and Luke pretended to chase him off stage. Jeers and laughter echoed through the gym. Some students looked uncomfortable, but many found it hilarious. Omari's hands clenched around the bleacher seat, fury roaring inside him. Still, he forced himself not to react, eyes fixed forward. Tessa put a comforting hand on his shoulder. When the lights came back on, the principal offered forced applause, either oblivious to the subtext or pretending to be. The rally resumed with a final cheer, but the damage was done. Omari felt the entire school had just witnessed the bullies' theatrical form of harassment. Somehow, that hurt more than the fists. He left the gym quickly at the end of the rally, ignoring the pitying glances some students threw his way. As the school day ended, an ominous sense of foreboding filled Omari. He glanced at his phone, no new messages. He debated skipping the route through the main hallway, but decided that running from the problem would only embolden Nick. So he walked with measured steps, Tessa by his side, and braced himself. A few yards from the main doors, Nick stepped into Omari's path, arms crossed. The hallway emptied as if on cue, leaving just a handful of onlookers who hovered near their lockers, anticipating a show. Tyler and Luke stood on either side of Nick, smirking with predatory glee. "How'd you like our skit?" Nick asked, voice dripping with faux innocence. Omari met Nick's gaze. "Real classy." "Classy, huh?" Nick sneered. "You know what else is classy? Knowing your place. You think you're so tough, but here's a news flash, you're just a nobody. A random piece that doesn't belong." Omari's jaw tightened, his heart hammered in his chest. "Get out of my way." Luke let out a short laugh. "What if we don't?" Tessa put a hand on Omari's arm, but he gently shrugged her off. He didn't want her in the crossfire. Nick sidled closer. The air crackled with tension. Then, slowly, Nick reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. "Smile," he said with a sinister grin, pointing the camera at Omari. "Show the world how you break when you mess with us." Without warning, Nick lunged, but this time, it wasn't a sloppy swing. Nick feinted low, then aimed a punch high. Omari's eyes widened in surprise clearly. Nick had some experience, or at least had practiced. Still, Omari's reflexes took over. He leaned back at the waist, dodging the strike. Tyler and Luke rushed in. Omari shifted stance, blocking Tyler's punch and countering with a swift elbow strike to the ribs precise enough to hurt but not incapacitate. Nick took another swing, this one at Omari's side. Omari deflected it, hooking Nick's arm and forcing the bully to pivot. But Luke attempted a tackle from behind, his arms encircling Omari's midsection. In a flash, Omari shifted his weight, throwing Luke over his hip. Luke landed with a thud, gasping for air. By now, more students gathered, foams up, capturing the chaos. Tessa shouted for someone to get a teacher, but no one moved. They were enthralled. Nick charged again, but Omari sidestepped, sending Nick tumbling into Tyler. Books and backpacks scattered in the frenzy. Suddenly, a voice bellowed from the far end of the hallway. "Break it up!" Miss Warren sprinted toward them, flanked by a couple of other teachers. Hearing the commotion, Nick, Tyler, and Luke scrambled to their feet, panting and disheveled, bruises blossoming on their arms. Nick glared at Omari with unbridled fury. "This isn't over," he hissed, then turned and bolted down the corridor. The teachers rushed to Omari, but he held up his hands, showing he was unhurt. Tessa stood by him, eyes wide with anxiety. "Miss." Warren demanded an explanation, but Nick and his cronies had vanished. Murmurs spread through the crowd, which slowly dispersed. Omari exhaled, adrenaline surging through his veins. He knew he had just broken his vow to keep things contained. The line had been crossed. Next time, it could be much worse. That evening, Omari's parents found out. Miss Warren called to inform them of an incident at school. Though Omari wasn't suspended, witnesses confirmed he was acting in self-defense. His parents were deeply concerned. They sat around the dinner table, quiet for a long stretch of time. Finally, his mother, Aisha Davis, broke the silence. "Omari, are you all right?" Omari nodded stiffly. "Yes. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I tried to avoid trouble, but," Anthony sighed, "but it found you. We know you'd never start a fight, son. We trust you." His mother's eyes glistened. "I just hate that you have to go through this yet again. Is it the same kind of hostility you faced before?" Omari looked at his mother, reading between the lines. She was asking if it was racially motivated. He shrugged. "I can't say for sure. Could be. But Nick's definitely got it out for me." Anthony placed a comforting hand on Omari's shoulder. We could talk to the principal, the school board. I don't want to make it a bigger deal," Omari cut in gently. "The more adults get involved, the sneakier Nick and his friends become. I want to handle it my way, without stooping to their level." Aisha pressed her lips together, concern etched in every line of her face. "Be careful, Omari. We trust you to do what's right. But if it escalates, we won't stand by." Omari nodded, grateful for their support. Later that night, he retreated to the garage, smashing his fists into the punching bag until sweat poured down his face. Each strike felt like an exorcism of the frustration and anger that threatened to swallow him whole. "I will stay in control," he told himself, repeating it like a mantra. "I will not become a monster." The following week, Roosevelt High felt like a pressure cooker. Everyone had heard about the hallway confrontation, and the new rumor was that Nick wanted revenge, real revenge, not just cheap pranks. Some students pointed out that Nick seemed especially unhinged lately. Others speculated that Nick might try to sabotage Omari's school life in ways that wouldn't risk another face-to-face loss. Even teachers seemed on edge, mindful of the tension brewing between these two students. Then came the rumor that Nick had an older cousin who was associated with some rough crowd in nearby Denver. The rumor was vague, maybe gang involvement, maybe just a group of unscrupulous young adults. The speculation was that Nick might call in outside help. Omari shrugged off these stories, but a part of him worried about how far Nick was willing to go. The days passed without major incident, though. Nick and his cronies kept their distance, a sullen cloud passing through the hallways. Omari almost began to relax, suspecting that maybe Nick's pride was still too wounded for another confrontation. But on Thursday afternoon, something happened that changed the game entirely. Omari was in the library, working on a history paper about the Reconstruction era. Tessa was with him, researching an English assignment. Her phone buzzed, and she frowned at the screen. "You're not going to like this," she muttered, sliding her phone toward Omari. A short video played. It was cell phone footage of the hallway fight from last week, stitched together with clips from the pep rally skit. The editing was mocking, overlaying humiliating sound effects each time Omari fought back. The audio spliced random insults, turning Omari's actions into comedic timing for the Bullies narrative. The video ended with an image of Nick's triumphant grin, text reading, "Who's the real menace?" Omari's gut twisted. "Where's this posted?" Tessa sighed. "Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, it's blowing up." Some account called RHS Exposed started it. Probably Nick's idea. Rage simmered beneath Omari's calm facade. This was an all-out smear campaign. His mind raced. If the administration got wind of it, would they see him as a troublemaker? Or would they side with Nick's version of events? More importantly, how would this intensify Nick's harassment? Tessa tapped on the phone. Comments are a mess. Some defend you, some bash you. A few mention you know that you're different. They're using race as a weapon. She hesitated, tears threatening to spill. I'm so sorry, Omari. He scrolled through the vile comments. Some referred to him with slurs. Some twisted the entire situation to make him the instigator. A moment of despair gripped him. It felt like an avalanche he couldn't stop. Then he steadied himself. I'm not going to let them break me, he said, voice trembling with indignation. If they want me gone, they'll have to do better than this. The next day, a strange hush hung over the school. Omari walked through the halls, noticing the quick glances and whispered conversations. The video's influence was undeniable. Yet, no faculty member had confronted him about it, likely because social media feuds often flew under the radar. Omari tried to focus on his classes, but each whisper felt like a cut against his dignity. He wondered if things would ever be normal again. After school, Omari headed straight to the parking lot to meet his mother, who was picking him up that day. Suddenly, he heard a voice call out, "Hey, Davis." Omari turned to see Nick approaching, alone this time. He wore that same smug grin, but there was a frenetic energy in his eyes that made Omari's stomach lurch. "What do you want?" Omari asked, tightening his grip on his bag. Nick shrugged. "I'm just here to let you know something. You haven't beaten me. You never will. Everyone at school already sees you for what you are, a dangerous freak who doesn't belong." Omari's fists clenched. "Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night?" Nick's grin vanished. "One way or another, I'm going to finish what I started. Watch your back." He turned and stalked off, leaving Omari seething. When Aisha's car pulled up, Omari slid into the passenger seat, giving only a curt greeting. His mother noticed the tension radiating off him. Did something happen? He hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Finally, he told her about the video and Nick's cryptic threats. Aisha listened, her expression darkening with each word. "That's cyberbullying, Omari. You should report it." "I know," he murmured, "but it'll just make him more vindictive." "I'm not sure I can handle it that way." His mother reached over and squeezed his hand. "We can't ignore it forever, Omari. Sometimes you have to stand up to this kind of hatred, not just with your fists, but with your voice." Her words lingered in his mind as they drove home. He realized that he might need to fight Nick's hostility on multiple fronts, through official channels, and, if necessary, physically. But the question remained, how far would Nick push this? And how far was Omari willing to go to stop him? Saturday arrived, bringing a temporary escape from the tension at school. Omari spent most of the day at home, working on an overdue project for English class. By late afternoon, he needed to clear his head. He hopped on his bike and rode through the winding streets of his neighborhood, eventually reaching a small park nestled by a creek. Boulder's autumn air was brisk, golden leaves fluttering from the trees. He parked his bike by a bench and watched a few kids playing on the swings, their laughter a sharp contrast to the turmoil in his own life. His phone buzzed a notification from an unknown number. Omari reluctantly checked it. "Unknown. Hey, new kid, if you want to settle this for real, meet me at the old sports field behind the school tonight at 9. No teachers, no cameras. Just you and me. Unless you're too scared." It wasn't signed, but Omari knew exactly who it was. Nick. The message was like a final challenge, a showdown away from prying eyes, a chance to break free of the psychological warfare. Omari stared at the text, torn between caution and a desire to end this once and for all. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he tried to weigh his options. If he told his parents, they would forbid him from going. If he informed the school, Nick would either deny it or spring another surprise. The part of him that clung to Grandmaster Li Wen's teachings advised caution, avoid violence unless absolutely necessary. Another part of him, though, bristled with the urge to face Nick and end this cycle of harassment. As the sun began to set, Omari made a decision. He'd go, not to seek revenge, but to put an end to Nick's threats. He quickly typed a reply, "Omari, I'll be there." The rest of the evening felt surreal. Omari ate dinner with his family, quiet but determined. Around 8 p.m., he said he was going for a bike ride, something he did often enough, that his parents didn't question it. He slipped out of the house, wearing track pants and a plain black hoodie. In his backpack, he carried only a water bottle and a small first aid kit, just in case. The ride to the old sports field was nearly pitch black, illuminated only by distant streetlights and the faint glow of the moon. His breath formed clouds in the chilly air. By the time he reached the field, it was 8:58. He glanced around. The place was deserted, the grass overgrown, bleachers rusted from disuse. An eerie quiet enveloped the area. At exactly 9 p.m., Omari saw headlights approaching. Nick's red Mustang rumbled onto the far side of the field, headlights cutting through the darkness. The engine turned off. Silence. Then Nick emerged, followed by Tyler, Luke, and two other kids Omari recognized from the football team. Omari's heart sank. This was no one-on-one fight. Nick stepped forward, grinning like a wolf. You showed up. Admirable. Stupid, but admirable. Omari's posture tensed. You said this was between you and me. Why'd you bring them? Nick shrugged. Insurance. You're the one with the magic kung fu, after all. Tyler let out a dark laugh. Thought you'd appreciate some spectators. Omari glanced around, planning escape routes if things got out of hand. A chain-link fence surrounded the field, and the only real exit was the driveway Nick's Mustang was blocking. 5 against 1. For a moment, Omari considered walking away, but Nick's smug face rekindled the fire within him. Maybe I can handle this, he thought. I have to. Nick rolled his shoulders. Let's settle this. No more cameras, no more teachers, just fists. If you're man enough to step up. Omari dropped his backpack by the sideline. He took a calming breath, entering the mental space he used during tournaments. Fine, he said softly. Let's do this. Nick rushed forward, swinging a right hook with surprising force. Omari slipped the punch, deflecting it with his forearm. He pivoted, planting a precise kick to Nick's midsection. Nick stumbled but recovered quickly, adrenaline fueling him. Tyler and Luke edged closer, eyes glinting in the darkness. Nick launched a barrage of strikes, each wilder than the last. Omari parried and dodged, but one punch clipped his shoulder, sending a bolt of pain through his arm. Nick pressed the advantage, throwing a knee toward Omari's ribs. Omari blocked it with both arms, wincing at the impact. He's strong, Omari realized, stronger than he had anticipated. Tyler lunged in from the side, fists swinging. Omari twisted, hooking Tyler's arm and flipping him with a judo throw. Tyler crashed to the ground, gasping. Luke attempted a kick, which Omari evaded, countering with a controlled strike to Luke's chest. Luke staggered backward, grimacing. Meanwhile, Nick circled around, looking for an opening. Omari sensed movement behind him. One of the other football players tried to tackle him. He sidestepped, but the player's shoulder rammed into Omari's hip, knocking him off balance. Omari tumbled onto the grass, damp earth pressing against his back. Instantly, Nick seized the moment, driving a kick at Omari's head. Omari rolled aside just in time, the toe of Nick's sneaker grazing his temple. Dazed, he scrambled to his feet. Another punch came his way, Nick's fist, whistling through the cold air. Omari managed a partial block, but the impact jarred him. He retreated, trying to keep Nick and his buddies in view. That's when Tyler and Luke joined forces, flanking Omari on either side. The other two players hung back, uncertain but still a threat. Omari found himself in a small pocket of space, forced to pivot rapidly between incoming attacks. He landed a quick roundhouse kick on Luke's thigh, eliciting a pained yelp. Tyler rushed in, but Omari ducked low, sweeping Tyler's legs. Tyler went down with a thud, cursing. Nick seized the opening, grabbing Omari from behind in a bear hug. Omari's training kicked in. He stomped on Nick's foot, twisted his hips, and reversed the hold, slamming Nick onto the grass. Nick's breath came out in a harsh wheeze, but before Omari could regain footing, Luke slammed into him from the side. The two of them tumbled across the field, fists flailing. Luke landed a solid punch on Omari's ribcage, forcing a shocked gasp from him. Reeling from the blow, Omari mustered enough leverage to push Luke off. He sprang to his feet again, ribs aching. Nick was standing now, breathing heavily. Grass stains smeared his jacket, and his face was contorted with pure rage. You think you're better than me? Nick spat, saliva flying. I don't care how well you fight. I'm not letting you walk away. Omari locked eyes with him. I never said I was better than you. I just wanted you to leave me alone. Nick howled with laughter, a savage sound. That's not how this works. Once more, Nick charged. Omari met him halfway, fists raised. They exchanged a flurry of blows, each landing glancing strikes. Omari managed to slip a heavy punch to Nick's jaw, causing him to stumble. But the other players swooped in again, one grabbing Omari's arm, another striking at his kidneys. Pain erupted in Omari's side. He gritted his teeth, turning to elbow one attacker in the jaw. He heard a crunch, followed by a yelp of agony. Before he could react further, Nick tackled him, slamming him onto the ground. Omari's vision blurred momentarily, the oxygen forced from his lungs. Nick's fists rained down, each blow more desperate than the last. Omari deflected most, but a few struck home, leaving him gasping. In a surge of adrenaline, Omari caught Nick's wrist mid-swing, twisted it, and used the momentum to flip Nick onto his back. He pinned Nick's arm, but Tyler kicked Omari in the shoulder, knocking him off balance. Nick scrambled free. The cycle of attacks continued, each second more brutal, the combatants gasping in the frigid night air. It felt endless, but eventually, the bullies began to slow, exhaustion and pain taking their toll. Omari was exhausted too, battered and bruised, but he still had enough training to pace himself. Nick, fueled by rage, was running on fumes. Tyler's limp was pronounced. Luke's face was swollen, and the other two players nursed bruises. Omari could barely lift his arms, pain radiating from his bruised ribs, but he steadied himself, chest heaving. Nick clutched his side, glaring murderously. Why won't you go down? He wheezed. Omari stared back, eyes fierce but sorrowful. Because I've fought all my life to stand up for myself. I'm not going anywhere. For a moment, it seemed Nick might collapse from sheer exhaustion. Then, in a desperate move, Nick reached into his back pocket. Omari's pulse thundered as he realized Nick was pulling out a concealed weapon, a small knife with a gleaming blade that caught the moonlight. The night air turned ice cold. Omari's mind reeled. A knife? Is he out of his mind? The other bullies froze, shocked that Nick would escalate to a lethal weapon. Nick gripped the handle, knuckles white. You think you're invincible? Nick spat, voice quivering with adrenaline. Let's see how tough you are now. Omari's eyes widened. This had gone beyond mere fists and feet. A lethal threat now hovered between them. He recalled Grandmaster Li Wen's words about weapon defense. The greatest weapon is the mind. Disarm the opponent's will, not just the weapon. Nick lunged, the blade flashing. Omari pivoted, feeling the wind of the knife as it swished past. A slip would mean a slash or a stab. Fear jolted Omari's senses into hyper-awareness. He deflected Nick's arm, attempting to disarm him with a quick lock. But Nick twisted free, hissing in pain. Tyler shouted, "Nick, what are you doing?" He seemed startled by his friend's escalation. "Shut up," Nick snarled, taking another wild slash. Omari hopped back, his heartbeat thunderous. The other two players retreated a few steps, unwilling to approach with a knife in play. Luke looked ashen, unsure how to intervene. Nick attacked again, more recklessly this time. Omari blocked with his forearm, wincing as the blade grazed his hoodie, slicing the fabric. With lightning reflexes, Omari seized Nick's wrist, applying pressure to the nerves in a disarming technique he'd practiced countless times. For a second, Nick resisted, eyes blazing. Then a sharp cry escaped him as Omari twisted the wrist with precise force. The knife clattered to the ground. Nick sank to his knees, face contorted in pain. Omari instinctively kicked the knife away, sending it skidding across the grass. Tyler stood by, frozen. Luke took a step forward but hesitated, seeing Nick subdued. Omari pinned Nick's arm, tears of anger and pain in his eyes. He didn't want it to come to this. Didn't want to humiliate or seriously harm him. But Nick's hatred had brought them here. "Let it go," Omari whispered, voice trembling with emotion. "Just stop." Nick struggled, but Omari maintained the hold. Nick's face contorted as he hissed, "I hate you. I'll always hate you." Omari's voice cracked as he replied, "That's your choice. But I'm done fighting you. Do you hear me? I'm done." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Omari's limbs ached, and Nick's labored breathing filled the silence. Then Luke and Tyler cautiously approached, unsure how to separate them. Omari released Nick's arm, stepping back with wary eyes. Nick staggered to his feet, swaying. He glared at Omari, his expression a tangled mass of pain, fear, and unbridled rage. This isn't over, he rasped. Even though he could barely stand, Omari's shoulders slumped. He doubted Nick could continue the fight in his condition, and the fear that Nick might do something even more extreme chilled him. "Go home, Nick," Omari said softly. "Go home before this gets worse." Tyler gently tugged Nick toward the Mustang, while Luke collected the other two shaken players. Nick yanked his arm free from Tyler, shooting one final venomous glance at Omari before limping to his car. The engine roared to life. Within minutes, the Mustang's taillights vanished into the darkness. Omari stood alone, the weight of the night's events pressing down on him like a lead blanket. His chest heaved, and every inch of his body felt battered and sore. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead he hadn't even realized he was bleeding. Steadying himself, he retrieved his backpack, trembling with residual adrenaline. As he wiped sweat from his brow, the moonlight reflected on the discarded knife. He picked it up carefully by the handle. The blade was small but deadly enough to end a life. A wave of anger and sorrow swept through him. He hurled the knife into the bushes, breathing raggedly. He was done. He limped to his bike, pain throbbing in his ribs and shoulder. As he pedaled home under the moonlit sky, he wondered if Nick would let this matter rest or if the worst was still to come. The weekend was a blur of painkillers, ice packs, and terse explanations. Omari told his parents he had a biking accident, and though they looked suspicious, they didn't push too hard. On Monday morning, he debated staying home, but a part of him refused to hide. He trudged into Roosevelt High, anticipating stares from curious classmates. To his surprise, the hallways were mostly quiet. No one approached him, no one teased him. He spotted Tyler and Luke at a distance, both sporting bruises. They glanced at Omari with something akin to guilt or fear before hurrying away. Nick was nowhere to be found. Whispers reached Omari's ears, something about Nick not showing up to school. Some said he was suspended. Others claimed he was nursing injuries at home. A rumor floated that the principal was investigating the fight that happened off campus, but no one had definitive proof. As the day wore on, Omari felt an odd mixture of relief and apprehension. Was Nick actually gone for good, or was this just the calm before another storm? During biology, Tessa slipped him a note. "I heard about what happened. Are you okay?" He scribbled back, "I'll be fine. Please keep this between us." She nodded, eyes filled with sympathy. After school, Omari visited Coach Riley to discuss the wrestling program. It felt surreal to be talking about normal extracurricular activities amid the chaos of recent events. But maybe normal was what he needed. Coach Riley welcomed him warmly, going over practice schedules and the basics of amateur wrestling. Omari agreed to try out next week, if only to find a constructive outlet for his energy. Days passed. Nick did not return. The rumor mill churned out theories. Maybe he transferred, maybe he was afraid of Omari, maybe he was in juvenile detention. Luke and Tyler became conspicuously quiet in class. Neither bothered Omari again. Slowly, the tension that had gripped Roosevelt High began to ease. By the following Monday, Omari allowed himself to hope that the chapter with Nick was finally over. He focused on his classes, joined Tessa in a science club meeting, and made progress with the wrestling tryouts. His bruises faded, replaced by a sense of guarded optimism. Students who once snickered at or avoided him now offered encouraging remarks, impressed by his resilience. Though Omari was wary of shallow acceptance, it felt good not to be constantly looking over his shoulder. On a crisp Thursday afternoon, Omari was practicing in the wrestling room, an old gym space with padded floors, when the door burst open. The sound startled him. He turned to see Miss Warren, face pale and eyes wide with urgency. "Omari," she gasped, "come with me." Confused, Omari followed her to the principal's office, heart pounding. When he entered, he saw his father already there, arms folded, looking grim. Principal Matthews gestured for them to sit. "We have a situation," he said soberly. It turned out that Nick had been hospitalized over the weekend. His injuries from the fight had been worse than initially thought: cracked ribs, a possible concussion. In his anger, he told his parents an embellished story, claiming that Omari attacked him with a group of friends. Nick's father, furious, had filed a police report accusing Omari of assault. Now the police wanted statements from everyone involved. Omari's stomach dropped. He tried to explain the events of that night, but Miss Warren looked conflicted. "We don't have any definitive proof," she said, "and the entire incident happened off school grounds. The best we can do is corroborate that Nick has threatened you multiple times, but it could turn into your word against his." Anthony placed a protective hand on Omar One's shoulder. "My son acted in self-defense. We'll get a lawyer if we have to." Principal Matthews sighed, looking sympathetic but resigned. "I'm afraid this is beyond my purview. The authorities will conduct their investigation. Omari, you need to be very clear about what happened." Omari's mind reeled. He felt a surge of injustice. Nick had been the one wielding a knife. What if they don't believe me? What if Nick or his friends lie? He recalled that Tyler and Luke had looked uneasy the past week. Would they testify in his favor or protect Nick? That evening, Omari and his parents visited the local police station. He gave a statement recounting the events detail by detail. His mother's face tightened at the mention of the knife. The officer taking the statement listened attentively, occasionally typing on a computer. Omari's father insisted on seeing evidence of Nick's injuries, but the officer explained that was privileged medical information. They left the station with no clear resolution, only a promise that the authorities would investigate. In the days that followed, Omari felt like he was living under a microscope. Nick's father, Mr. Henderson, a known businessman in the community, pushed the narrative that Omari was a violent thug. Some parents withdrew their children's friendship. Others rallied behind Omari, pointing out how Nick had a history of bullying and aggression. It was an ugly social divide, culminating in heated discussions during a PTA meeting. Tessa tried to comfort Omari, but he felt increasingly isolated. He attended wrestling practice to clear his head, but even that sanctuary felt tainted by the looming threat of legal repercussions. Every day, he wondered if he'd see police lights waiting for him after school. Then, the break he needed came from an unexpected source, Tyler. One afternoon, Tyler approached Omari in the hallway, hands tucked into his pockets. "Hey," Tyler mumbled, eyes darting nervously. I need to talk to you." Omari's posture stiffened. "What is it?" Tyler swallowed hard. "I'm sorry about everything. About Nick, about the fights. He's my friend, or was, but he went too far. And that night, he had a knife. You didn't start anything. We all know that." Omari studied Tyler's face, searching for sincerity. "Why are you telling me this now?" Tyler looked pained. "Because the police want our statements. Nick's dad is pressuring us to lie. But I can't. My parents told me to do the right thing, and I'm tired of covering up for Nick. I'm prepared to tell the truth, that Nick planned the fight, that he used the knife first." Relief and wariness mingled in Omar One's chest. "That would help me. But are you sure? Nick's not going to forgive you." Tyler gave a trembling laugh. "At this point, I don't care. I'm done letting him get away with this." Luke, overhearing the conversation, nodded in silent agreement. Within days, Tyler and Luke formally gave statements to the police, confirming Omari's story. They admitted to going to the old sports field with Nick, seeing him wield a knife, and watching him attack Omari. Although they had participated in the fight, they insisted it was under Nick's leadership. This new testimony shifted the case dramatically. Nick's father's accusations lost credibility when the authorities compared statements. Eventually, the police concluded that Omari acted in self-defense. Though Nick's family threatened to press civil charges, no criminal charges were filed against Omari. The school's internal investigation followed suit, opting not to punish him. News spread quickly. By the following week, Nick still hadn't returned to Roosevelt High. Rumor had it he might transfer out of state to live with relatives. Tyler and Luke found themselves in a strange position, disowned by Nick but tentatively forging a new path away from bullying. Some students admired their honesty, others called them traitors. But for Omari, the nightmare seemed to be over. In the aftermath, Omari discovered that standing up for oneself comes in many forms, from using disciplined martial arts skills to relying on truth and integrity when it truly matters. The bullies learned a powerful lesson. Malicious intent eventually implodes under its own weight, and courage, coupled with honesty, always prevails in the end.